Hey guys, thanks for checking out another one of my battle reports. This time I am again taking my Chaos Space Marines, doing some more testing in light of the Malefic Lord change and some other changes to the game that are being brought in with Chapter Approved. Still don't know all of them just yet, but just the points changes are enough to kind of shake things up in the meta, which is, in my opinion, a good thing. But we'll see how this might change, and I believe there's supposed to be a character targeting change goes as well. Um, so once that all that information is in hand, which should be sometime next week, as of throwing this video up, which would be good because then we can kind of see how everything is going, get the Blood Angels and Dark Angels books, and then just keep on chugging. Probably not going to be done with any big changes until well into 2018, just because of how many codexes are still left. But like I said, continuing to test out my chaos list with all the obliterators and the stacking minus to hit and all that kind of fun stuff. This time I am up against Kevin, a guy I've played before with his Salamanders army. I actually did a battle report of the game that I played against him before. Pretty one-sided. Took a lot of Malefic Lords, obviously, and just managed to walk across the table and kill pretty much everything he had. We talked about some changes to his list after the last game that we played, some of which it seems like he took to heart, and some of which he tested and didn't really find to his liking, which is totally fine. Not my army, and not my place to be telling people what to run in a competitive or non-competitive setting. So we were both looking to test out some new stuff, and that's just what we did. So we can see here, my list this time is just a little tiny bit different than what I took last time. I am running one of the Obliterator units with Mark of Slanesh instead of Mark of Tzeentch, so that means they will not get the bonus from the Changeling, but I can use Endless Cacophony on them. Just wanted to test this out to see if it was worth having that one unit with Mark of Slanesh. My kind of hypothesis was that everyone that I play against will just shoot them because they are the easier ones to kill, and they'll only get one turn of Endless Cacophony at the expense of probably going down faster. So it's kind of like a wash in my opinion, and I have to spend 2 points, two command points I should say, to get to that wash. So I'm not really loving that. Probably just going to run them all with Tzeentch to make it as annoying as possible, but I definitely did want to try that out. Fortunately, I still have the cultists that could use Endless Cacophony. I still have access to Veterans of the Long War and stuff, and I actually think that not using Endless Cacophony on the Obliterators will help out my command point economy a little bit better, because there's plenty of desirability to use rerolls in this list. I definitely have some times where I'll be using Veterans of the Long War quite a bit, so that's a command point. Recycling the cultists, that usually happens twice, maybe 3 times a game, stuff like that. So I think that, like I said, not having the temptation to use Endless Cacophony right away, while it is a very powerful tool for that kind of shock and awe, the Obliterators come down, you can fire them 6 times instead of 5 basically, and double tap with one of them that gets Veterans of the Long War if you go that route. That's really where it shines, is when you put Veterans of the Long War on one of the Obliterator units, and that's the one that you shoot twice. Unfortunately, when you're running just one of them with Mark of Slanesh, if you don't use Veterans of the Long War on that one, so maybe they didn't roll a very good profile for what you're shooting at, and the +1 to wound is kind of a waste. It's not as good as when I was running them all with Mark of Slanesh, and that way I'd be like, oh, okay, this one got like the tank killing profile, and I really need to kill this tank, so I'll use it on them right now, and they'll wound this tank on 2s, and then I can come back to them later and it'll just be, gravy. It doesn't work quite that well. So while it does appear, pretty sexy on first glance, it's a little bit of a trap in my opinion. Moving over to the Salamanders list, we have kind of a pretty standard gun line, I would say. There's a captain with a bolt rifle, a lieutenant with a bolt rifle, a librarian, and Harith Shen, who is the Forge World Salamander's apothecary. Basically, he has a plasma pistol that doesn't kill him if he overcharges it, a power sword that's a little bit better, and he brings guys back to life on a 3+ instead of a 4+. He also heals them for D3 +1 wounds, whereas I think the regular apothecary just heals for 1 wound. It might be D3 wounds, I don't really really remember. But yeah, he's just a little bit better, and he only costs a little bit more, so he's definitely worth taking. There's also a Chapter Ancient with the Standard of the Emperor Ascendant. Super good item with Salamanders because they get to use their Salamander reroll when they do their kind of dying attack. So on a 3+, guys get to come back just for enough time to shoot once or fight once, and then you can use not only the lieutenant and the captain rerolls, but you can use the salamander rerolls as well. So that helps if you roll like 2s, stuff like that. And then there's 2 Venerable Dreadnoughts, one with a close combat weapon and a Twin Las, the other one with a Twin Las and a missile launcher, so one that's a little fighty, one that's, all shooty. There's also 5 Scouts with Bolters, so this is a big change that I told him to make to kind of counter armies that have Deep Strike. You can use the Scouts to push them out very effectively. At least for the first turn, they'll probably go down after that, but if you can deny your opponent from bringing down Deep Strike on the first turn, you can usually kind of swing the game into your advantage at that point, especially if they have a big Deep Strike army like mine is. There's also a land speeder with 2 heavy flamers. That was something I recommended after our last game as well. I think that's the best way to run a land speeder. They're constantly moving, so the other heavy weapons, get minus to hit. They're usually not near the army for the kind of reroll auras and stuff like that. And then they're very fragile, so a good way to kind of use them is just run them, into your opponent quickly, flame some stuff, maybe charge a tank or something to tie it up, kind of use them as like a mobile distraction piece, and the heavy flamers let you do that very easily and for not too many points, especially since assault cannons are going up in points and stuff like that with a chapter approved. There's also 2 Devastator units, each with a cherub. Both have a split between las cannons and missile launchers, and then the sergeant has a combi plasma, so they're pretty kitted out. They have the extra wounds with the full unit and all that kind of stuff, so they're a little bit more durable than your normal Devastator. There's also a Whirlwind with the Castellan launcher, which is the anti-infantry 2d6 shot one. I think that's the much better way to go. The other profile is very awkward against like vehicles. It can kill like infantry, okay, like medium infantry or heavy infantry in some cases, but the lack of good AP on it is not so great, and 2d3 shots is not exactly bringing sexy back. And then there are also 10 Hellblasters in the list, so definitely want to watch out for those, because 10 Hellblasters can put a pretty big hole into my Obliterators, although because of the stacking minus to hit that my army has, very unlikely that he's going to be doing any kind of overcharging, which does kind of help me in that regard, not only making it so that they wound on 3s instead of 2s, but also making it so that they're only a single point of damage. But that many plasma shots, still definitely something to watch out for. We ended up playing ITC mission number 4, which is Precious Cargo. It's the one where you have 4 objectives kind of in the corners, and then you nominate one before the game starts, as does your opponent, and you can each move that one. If you hold your opponent's Precious Cargo objective, you get a bonus point. Unfortunately, we forgot to move the objectives before the game started. Fortunately, it didn't really matter, but I think both times I played this one, I just forgot to do that. Like me and my opponent forgot to do it. So we kind of just played them straight up as they are. We also played Frontline Assault, I believe it is, for the deployment zone, the one that's hammer and anvil, but shorter on the flanks and a little bit further up in the middle. So like I was saying in my last video, if you checked out my battle report against White Scars, I think the hammer and anvil deployment types kind of favor me because I'm sticking very close to the sides of the table edge, and having a long table edge really helps me do that. For secondaries, I'm going with the Reaper. I can't get full points for it, but I can get 3 out of 4, which against Marines is often the best you can do. As I keep saying, Marines are very good in the ITC secondaries. They're probably one of the easiest armies to build to deny your opponent from being able to take a lot of secondaries, which is extremely powerful. I also took Recon. Since I'm going up against a gun line, I think it won't be quite so hard to score it. And then I took Headhunter because of the amount of characters. Salamanders took the Reaper, as is pretty standard against me. Headhunter, still pretty standard. And then Death by 1,000 Cuts, which is definitely a weird one. I probably would have taken maybe like Kingslayer just to try to get some points out of that, because Death by 1,000 Cuts is just very hard against my army. The Obliterators, are kind of an enticing target, but killing 3 or 2 units of them to combo with something else is very difficult now that I have all the minus to hit stacking, and I just don't have the characters that I used to hang out in the wind for like an easy sniper target, or if you can peel off some of the cultists to shoot at one of them, something like that. My character is a lot more defensive now, so I think Death by 1,000 Cuts is kind of an uphill battle. I ended up not getting the first turn, so Salamanders took the first turn. I did not seize, so away we go here. This is my deployment. As you can see, I have both the objectives, one by that house there on the right, and then the other one in the forest. So I'm just kind of standing off a little bit. No need to pile onto that objective just yet, because we don't score until the end of the round for that stuff in the end of my turn, so I have plenty of time to move on to it. That's something I definitely am going to be doing more in the future, is taking my time gain onto the objectives turn one. I don't need to deploy on them, if it means that I'm going to be a little bit more in the line of fire, but I kind of feinted my deployment a little bit this time, if you will. So I put all my stuff in a deep strike. I was deploying my brimstones as my kind of chaff, just hold the objective, stay in the back, and then I deployed the renegade commander. So that gives me like 9 drops, while I can see what the Salamanders army is doing. And what I wanted to see is kind of where some of those units went, the Hellblasters, the Devastators, stuff like that, if I could, and then figure out what flank I want to be strongest on. So I also, put the one cultist unit in the middle there, because I want to take one advantage of the deployment space I have, but also it kind of shows that maybe I'm going to be doing a very standard deployment where I'm just kind of one unit in the center, one unit on each flank or something. But as you can see, I ended up going hard onto the right flank, so that cost me some ability to move my guys up. They're a little farther back than they normally would be, but because of the table we're playing on, again, forests are blocking line of sight unless you get into them, and then the houses are just blocking line of sight in totality. Even if they have a crack or something between them, that's not really supposed to be there. So because of that big forest in the middle, I can kind of make it so that this very static army that I'm going against will have to do some movement in order to be able to see, my army, and that's exactly what I want to do, because that's just, giving more minuses to hit on some of those units, stuff like that, and that only benefits me. So this is my opponent. You can see that he has the scouts kind of, covering all the angles. The whirlwind and the land speeder are also denying me from dropping in the back. This is something that I see a lot of people do against me. They deny the backfield. If you're going up against somebody who has a lot of shooting deep strike, it's very unlikely that they're going to deep strike into your backfield, because then you can just hit them back with your whole army, charge them, stuff like that. This is something I would maybe do against guard or like a tank heavy army, something like that. But in this case, I don't have any intention of dropping in the backfield. So all this is really doing is, one, keeping the land speeder out of the game, and 2, keeping the whirlwind away from the captain and lieutenant, which is going to decrease its effectiveness. So I think I certainly can't fault Kevin for keeping me out of his deployment zone, but I think that it wasn't really something he had to be worried about. So he could have probably deployed those 2 units a little bit better to get some more work out of them. But then you can see that the Devastators are just kind of glommed up in the middle there. The Hellblasters are in that forest on the left, which is good news for me. When I saw that, I figured I was going to go hard on the right, because the Devastators are not in cover, so that means that I could shoot them up with the Obliterators really well, even if I don't get the best AP rolls. And then while the Hellblasters can move over, they'll have to do that, so they can't like Auspex scan me. They can't just do anything like that, really. So I should be able to come down, hit the Devastators, and then kind of go from there. Both the Dreadnoughts are in the middle, as well as is the kind of the character blob. And then this is just a shot from the other side. You could see that the Hellblasters are kind of barely holding that objective. Another reason to go hard on the right, because if I kill everything from my right-hand flank, then the Hellblasters are going to have to come over, which means that either those scouts have to hold that objective, which are very easy to shoot off of it. Scouts are not very durable, or the land speeder has to stand there, which, because of its short-range weapons, doesn't means it's not going to be doing anything. Maybe a Dreadnought has to go over there, which means it has to move, so that's -1 to hit, and then it might not be able to see as easily, stuff like that. So it's definitely in my favor to do what I'm doing. Another overview of the table, you can just kind of see how our armies are situated against each other. This is more of a shot from Kevin's perspective, so I'll go back to this one, linger on it for just a second in case you want to look at it. And then this is Kevin's perspective. Like I said, you can see everything pretty spread out, but concentrate around the characters in the middle, particularly the Ancient with the banner, to make sure that the guys can come back on a 3+, which is, like I said, super great item for Salamanders. And then this is away we go. So crucially, Kevin did not move any of his models on turn 1. This is two huge mistakes. One, the land speeder is doing nothing, so it's going to stay way back there. That means it's probably going to be another turn or 2 turns before it can get involved in the game. 2 heavy flamers, really good against my army. Decent against the Obliterators, but really good against the cultists. It can also, because it flies and is very fast, it can charge. It can charge some of those units to tie them up. So it's definitely something that, although it's pretty easy to destroy. Unit that I definitely was happy to see, not getting anywhere near me. And then the cultists not moving, or sorry, the scouts not moving up means that I have some room to play with, actually, when it comes to dropping my Obliterators. If all of the scouts had moved just 6 inches forward, not even advanced, just move 6 inches forward, they would have been able to completely keep me out of being able to deep strike in range of the Devastators. So at that point, I have to make the decision of probably not bringing the Obliterators in until turn 2. I can kill all the cultists, no problem, with the las guns and some smites and things like that. But that means that the Salamanders army has 2 turns to, use all the Obliterators, or use all the Devastators, I'm sorry, and then the Dreadnoughts and all that kind of stuff without me being able to do anything about it. And then that kind of puts me on the back foot. But as it was, they just kept those positions that you can see in this picture, and I have a little bubble kind of between these 2 forests here where I can drop them, and that's more than enough. Whoa, what is going on here? Okay, so yeah, like I said, sorry, I guess I only took 1 picture for this turn. I lost a lot of cultists. You can see that the unit that was in the middle is almost entirely gone. Because of the forest denying some line of sight, I was able to dodge a couple frag missiles, a couple dreadnought shots, things like that definitely could have finished that unit off. I only had 10 left, and then the whirlwind did not roll very well either. I think it only killed a couple, like 5 shots. It doesn't have in range of the captain or lieutenant, doesn't have rerolls for the chapter tactics. It's not a dreadnought or a guy, so I was fortunate to keep that unit around, especially with how many missile launchers is being packed and things like that, and all the scouts having bolters and stuff. So I will get to recycle them, which is pretty crucial play. So I don't really take any big damage on turn 1. Luckily, like I said, it's going to be recycling those cultists. Pretty typical for this army. I did hide a couple behind the forest there, like you can see in near the pink unit, just in case things got really hairy, because they can't be seen by pretty much anything. And that's something I'll be doing more of, is probably hiding more cultists behind things that, so that I can keep the unit around unless there's a significant amount of ignores line of sight shooting, which most armies don't have that much of. And then, okay, yeah, so we'll go to this one first. So this is me bringing all the Obliterators in. Most of my army moves up. I also recycle the cultists onto the right-hand side, move the Demon Prince up so I can maintain the Fearless bubble, all that important stuff. But you can see here I have, room to bring all the Obliterators in. Almost all of them have range to both of the Devastator units, whereas if those scouts had just moved up 6 more inches, I wouldn't have range to any of that stuff, like I said, and it would be a lot hairier. But as it is, I'm able to come down pretty much where I want. Unfortunately, I don't have cover on the units because I'm being forced out of the cover by the scouts, but my plan is just kill a lot of the Devastators and then kind of ride the -1 to hit. The cover isn't that great anyways. It's good against the missiles, but the las cannons are still pretty much going to be I guess I would get a 4+ against the las cannons, so yeah, it doesn't matter, but there's not much I can do about it, as I said. The Warpsmith also moves up into the forest. He advanced there, so he's going to try to shoot his flamer and his meltagun at some of those scouts, take him out, and then also just make himself, a bit of an annoyance. But I don't really have much for him to do this game, so like I said, I'm just using him to kind of try to thin some of those scout units out. And then this is post my shooting phase. So Psychic, I don't really do anything, but I do warp time the cultists that I brought back to get them more into the fight. That's I took warp time on the Demon Prince this game because I knew that I was probably gonna have to recycle one of the cultist units, and then I wanted to get them, back into the game a little bit more quickly. Maybe threaten to tie something up, or just get them in front of the Obliterators, so that in case the Dreadnoughts get a little aggressive, or the Land Speeder or something like that, that I can't have them shut down. But shooting phase goes really, really well. I managed to kill both of the Devastator units, leaving one with just the Sergeant. I don't kill, other than I kill all the scouts in the center. mostly with the cultists, and I kill the other scout unit on the right down to one, who I leave alive just so I can charge him with the cultists, because it's very likely that I'll kill him. And again, I want to make that cultist unit a real nuisance, threaten to maybe tie up the whirlwind or the dreadnoughts or something like that, that still have those big anti-tank guns that are threatening my obliterators. Which you can see in this photo, which I took out of order for some reason. Sorry about that. This is me just gaining range to charge that sergeant for the scouts. So, and then here's kind of an overview of my army. You can see me spilling forward. Have a unit. The unpainted unit that's on the wrong size bases of obliterators is the one with Mark of Slanesh. I did not put them as a forward unit, which I probably should have. Because then I could have gotten more range to them. I did not... No, I did end up using Endless Cacophony on them, just to finish off some of the Devastators, so that helped me get a little bit more shooting done, but nothing too major. And then you can see that the Demon Prince also took 2 wounds from casting Warp Time, because he double-sixed it. But the cultist made that charge into the scout sergeant. You can see that little hole kind of in the middle of him where he was. Just beat him down with attacks. 4s rerolling 1s and then 5s to wound, but he only has a 4+ save, so it was enough to get the job done. And then didn't want to consolidate further into his army. Probably should have in hindsight, but I was still hanging back just a little bit because I don't want maybe the dreadnought to get into them on his terms. So I'd rather kind of pin him back more, but not too big of a deal. So since I actually killed the Devastators, I shot him Kevin off of one of his objectives. So that gives me 4 points for the turn, whereas Kevin only got 1 point for his turn because he failed to kill a unit. So I'm off to a pretty big scenario lead as well. And this is just more of an overview of the table. This is actually on Kevin's movement phase, so he moves the sergeant over to grab the objective. The apothecary fails to bring one of the Devastators back, which was bad. The Dreadnought moves forward, gets Psychic Fortress and Veil of Time cast on him, and then the Hellblasters are also moving forward, but they aren't very fast, and because of that big forest, like I said, most of them cannot see, although they are still holding that objective over there. The scouts on the left flank are moving, they actually ran towards my Brimstones because, there's really not much for them to do other than to try to get in my backfield, maybe get me off of one of my objectives, so I'll probably have to deal with them, in a little bit, but I'm not overly worried about it. And then the land speeder finally moves up, still out of range for everything, so like I said, it is going to take like 2 turns for it to get back into the game, which is unfortunate, but it's not something I have to worry about just right now. And then, so for shooting, you can see in this photo from the Slanesh marked unit, I lose 2 Obliterators. Again, they were only -1 to be shot, which is what I figured was going to happen. They were going to get focused down, so I don't think I'll be running them with Mark of Slanesh in the future. I think I'll just, like I said, make do with not relying on Endless Cacophony or anything like that. Shouldn't be a big deal against most armies, but that's really, not that big of a loss. I take some more losses into those cultists that are at the bottom of the picture as well. Just throwing like some bolters into them. Some of the Hellblasters shoot them because they can't see the Obliterators, stuff like that. But these are all wasted attacks because, the unit is not really important and there's not that much shooting left to really take it down. I've killed a lot of the bolters. If Hellblasters and stuff like that want to shoot them, that's totally fine with me. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not very concerned about it. This is over to my turn. So this is post my shooting phase, but I think I'm sure have a picture of the movement as well. Finish off that sergeant, kill a lot of the Hellblasters. You can see only 4 of them are left. Also kill one of the Venerable Dreadnoughts and the Land Speeder. So would have liked to finish off the other Dreadnought, but I knew that I only had like 1 unit left to shoot at him, and that's not very unlikely to kill him. So I instead dumped them into the Land Speeder and killed that, just to make sure that there's one, not something that can go and easily hold one of the objectives, and then also get into my lines and charge me like I was talking about, stuff like that. So right now, at the end of my turn, I actually shoot Kevin off of both of his objectives, which is pretty bad for him. I also do not recycle this cultist unit. I move it forward and then warp time it, and then manage to get a charge into the whirlwind just to tie it up. You can see that I'm getting behind those houses there. So again, if Kevin wants to take some of his characters or something and try to get into the cultist, try to free it up, that's fine. I specifically did not recycle them because I wanted to make it a little bit more tantalizing of a target to do that. I don't think he's going to have the attacks to actually kill them all. And I can blow 2 command points to make them fearless if I really need to, depending on what's going on with the game. But if he's content to let me just sit on that whirlwind for the rest of the game, that's fine. And if he wants to throw some guys over there and kind of get them more out of the game or something, that's also fine with me as well. Over here we have the scouts that were going for the brimstones. I advance the warpsmith to try to take care of them. Only managed to kill 1. I'm just rolling really bad for him this game. It's I kept missing with his meltagun, even though it needs a 3 to hit, even when he runs. And then I was rolling low for the flamer and stuff like that. But I do manage to kill 1 with the flamer, so that just kind of helps take some of them out. But I can't put a charge into them because I advanced, like I said. And then this is, so I guess I didn't have an overview of my army, but this is Kevin's turn 3. So he moves the remaining Hellblasters up, brings one of them back to life with the Apothecary, which is good. And then, finally has line of sight to my Obliterators and stuff like that. Moves his Ancient back on his objective so that he can get an objective. Again, I'm up to I think I'm up to 8-2 at this point because Kevin hasn't been able to kill a unit on his turn, but I've been able to, always kill more, shoot him off his objectives, so I'm holding more objectives, all that good stuff, which is definitely a weakness of a gun line in the ITC format, especially against an opponent going second. But yeah, so he's, kind of just moves his Hellblasters up, the Dreadnought stays still, he's shooting what little he has left at my army, kills 1 Obliterator, I think. Yeah, I think he kills, no, he kills a couple. Yeah, he kills, I think, 2, and then wounds another 1, so puts some good shooting into them there, mostly with the Dreadnought, even with the minus to hit stacking. Definitely got some good rolls in there using the Salamander tactic and all that. But this is on my turn. I just shuffle up the Barris a little bit. I'm still in combat with the Whirlwind. I shoot their main Hellblasters to death pretty much, so that's taking out one of the last things he has to deal with my army. And then before I'm actually done with my shooting phase, we just call it there because the game's pretty much over. The Warpsmith moved up and was going to kill the rest of the scouts because they moved and did not make a charge into the brimstones. They didn't roll in high enough. So the Warpsmith is just going to move up, shoot them, and then get them in combat and probably be able to finish them off because he has a power axe, and the scouts aren't really good in close combat, especially with bolters. And then in the rest of my shooting phase, I'm pretty likely to kill his Kevin's Dreadnought and then finish off the Hellblaster squad as well. And at that point, he has pretty much no shooting left. Just has the characters, which don't really have anything to buff anymore. The Whirlwind will still be tied up. And it's very hard for him to get onto objectives at that point. He isn't close enough to really make any big plays into the Obliterators. So, I'll just finish him off next turn, probably bring the Demon Prince into the fray, kill one of the characters with that or something, and then the game is effectively over at that point. Also, I have such a huge scenario lead that it's basically impossible for him to come back, even if he doesn't get tabled. So there's that consideration as well. So yeah, with that, we decided to call it. That was a win for me. Again, kind of a one-sided game, unfortunately, but my list is, very good, especially when I know what I'm doing with it, what targets to shoot and things like that. And again, I didn't feel like Kevin was really properly equipped to deal with everything I was bringing. The Hellblasters are a pretty poor choice for dealing with what I've brought, which is the minus to hit, because they can't overcharge, as they'll die on 1s, 2s, and 3s, usually, which is really, really bad. You can't do that with such an expensive unit. So he needed something, more like the Devastators and the Dreadnoughts, but that's what I was targeting first because I knew those were his better bets of being able to deal with my army, and then that kind of just spiraled out of control. So what did we learn? As usual, you have to be aggressive with aggressive models. I say this quite a bit, especially when you're behind. You have to get aggressive and put yourself in positions to kind of gamble and get big swings in the game. I didn't feel like that happened this game, particularly with the land speeder. It played no part in the game. It was just kind of hanging out in the back, and then I killed it for free. It didn't get to do anything, and it could have done quite a few different things this game. The scouts also, not being very aggressive, kind of just sitting back and saying we did a good enough job. just yeah, a couple other things like that. I think the Dreadnought with the close combat weapon could have been making himself a little bit more, have a little bit more of a presence, so that he was more of a high priority target on my list. He was definitely a target because of the twin las cannon, but I don't want that Dreadnought close combat weapon to be able to get in combat with my Obliterators or anything. So I think that there could have been some more pressing of the, I won't say advantage, but just pressing the situation in the case of the Salamanders army. Another thing is gun lines continue to not work well in the ITC format in my experience. Particularly when they go first. Normally gun lines love to go first, but on properly built tables, gun lines can't do as much damage as they're accustomed to, because you usually have to move to get line of sight and stuff like that, and those minus to hit penalties really eat into the math of what your army is capable of. Maybe you can't pile all the guys in your army in to be able to see things, so you don't get to shoot with some of it, stuff like that. And then they're just very bad on scenario. If you shoot them off of objectives, it can be hard for them to get back onto objectives. On the scenarios where you kind of have to get more midfield to get the objectives, they have a hard time doing that because their army is just not equipped. They don't have a screen unit or a throwaway unit all the time, or if they do, it's so easy to kill that you can just get rid of it. This is like more of a problem for guard in particular, but the Salamanders list was very gunline heavy. It has a lot of units that just want to stand there and shoot on an open field. All the Devastators, the Dreadnoughts, the Whirlwind, stuff like that, where he was pretty much Kevin was pretty much trapped in his deployment zone the whole game, and I was coming to get him, projecting my force. I'm like threatening his objective pretty soon, shooting him off of his objective, whereas my objectives are under absolutely no threat whatsoever. I could just hold them with my units in the back while he's pressed to deal with the stuff that's kind of at his door. So I think if you're going to play, a shooting-centric army, which is, of course, what most armies are in 40k, you have to be much more mobile and have the ability to deal with, threats through movement instead of just hoping that, people will come to you exactly as you want them to and then mow them down as they do so. That's just not really going to work against good players with competitive armies. And then the last thing is scouts are really good at denying deep strike when you use them appropriately. Probably the thing that swung the game the hardest this time was the Kevin scouts did not move forward on turn 1. That would have been a really nice thing for me to get first turn on, because obviously I could have brought in the deep strike and they couldn't do anything about it. But going second, those scouts really should have just shut down my entire deployment zone, so that I could not bring those Devastators in, which I almost certainly would not have. I kill all of those scouts, of course, but then we've both kind of done nothing on turn 1, which is in the Salamander player's favor. So, I'll have killed the scouts, of course, and he would have almost killed a cultist unit, but then, maybe he gets another crack at killing a cultist unit with some improved line of sight now, because like I said, some of the Dreadnoughts could not see the cultists. The Whirlwind got a bad roll. He didn't have bolters in range. You could have moved some of those bolter Devastators up, which is something you should always do if you're running extra Devastators. You need to move the bolter guys up and then leave the heavy weapons in the back, kind of daisy chain the coherency so that you can use the bolters. And with that, who knows, you might have been able to wipe out one of those cultist units, and then he has something going for him at least. I think the game is still very much an uphill battle, but that's his definitely his best chance to win. But because the scouts didn't really do their job, I was able to bring the bulk of my army, and the Obliterators are half my list in points, and then just annihilate the Devastators and kind of just swing the game from there, because once the Devastators are gone, that's most of his army's shooting, and then just toilet bowl from there. So yeah, if you're using scouts or any kind of unit to deny deep strike with, be aggressive with them, advance them on the first turn if you have to, just get them in there, because that's their job, is to get you that early game advantage where maybe the deep strikers can't come in and be that difference maker. They'll always come in at some point, but you have to say, what's the makeup of this game going to look like, and then probably make that decision on if you need to really sell out to deny them coming in on that turn, or maybe you can let them come down. It really depends on what your opponent is deep striking against you, whether it be a melee unit or maybe a shorter range gun unit like some Tau thing, stuff like that. But in my case, I'm a pretty mid-range unit, so you have to be very aggressive with those anti-deep strike elements to to pin me back, and that just wasn't done this game. So yeah, hopefully that was a little illuminating for people out there that are trying to play against deep strike armies and trying to learn some of the more advanced concepts of competitive 40k. So thank you for watching as always. Feel free to leave a comment or something on the video, and I love to reply to that kind of stuff. And I will see you guys next time.